Hello, my name is Dave Court. I'm an artist based in Adelaide, Australia, living and working on Ghana country, and I'm excited to share a bit with you today about my practice and my work that uses AI tools. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I'm using and engaging with these new tools and technologies and how I'm thinking about them in the work and in general, and about the medium specificity of these new ways of making. I have a background in painting, and I've been making work for the last 10 years across painting, public art, sculpture, a lot of mural work, and using digital tools throughout all of this. And over the last few years have been really following along and experimenting with a range of different AI tools and following these things as they've been developing over the last few years, starting with GAN stuff and then more recently with like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion and text to video, and kind of just keeping up with these things as it's developing so fast. Little disclaimer, I did use GPT-4 to help me write this presentation, to help get my thoughts down and kind of consolidate and order the writing. I've also used an AI-assisted video editing program to help me put this little video together called Descript, which has been very helpful as well. So for this talk, I'll walk through a couple projects of mine. I think the main one that we'll be looking at is an exhibition that I put on in 2022 called Learning Machine. This was a body of work of mine that was painting and sculpture, video, interactive works, sound, projection, all of these processes that I've been experimenting with for the last few years. So my Learning Machine exhibition showed with Backwards Gallery in Melbourne. The main part of it was a collection of paintings that I had made using the processes that I developed over the last couple of years of drawing, vectorizing, laser cutting. So these paintings, they would start out as drawings on paper or objects that I would draw in VR using like Quest 2 headset, and Gravity Sketch is the program that I use there. And it would be creating these abstract elements and abstract gestures, which I would then bring into Blender 3D software and compose these objects as virtual sculptures, and then render out from there as images, and then vectorize with Adobe Illustrator, draw them as vectors, and then use that, send a laser cutter to cut them out of plywood, and then get them back as basically a big jigsaw puzzle of pieces, and paint these and then glue them back together to create the final painting object. So it's kind of like a whole feedback loop of processes that I've developed. And then for Learning Machine, I built into this feedback loop the use of AI generative tools. I was granted artist access to DALL-E 2 when they were rolling that out last year. Part of that tool set, for people that aren't familiar, is the ability to upload your image and create variations. So I would take a plan for a painting that I was going to be making and then upload it to DALL-E, create variations of the image, and then work from that to create a companion piece to this original painting, basically. It was interesting to me the ways in which DALL-E interpreted and understood abstract mark making. It was interesting to me the ways that it would try and interpret what it was that it was looking at and understand what it was that I had fed it, and then recreate this in different ways. I'm kind of interested in the contrast between this organic human-made gesture with what is an AI interpretation of that, and using that as a symbol and a way of exploring the differences between human-made and AI-generated images in lots of different areas. So it's kind of interesting to me the logic that the AI tries to create in trying to rebuild these things, and the weird imperfections and the kind of uncanniness where it doesn't quite get there. Another major work that I had in the exhibition was a projected video work. So this was a looping video using all of the assets that I had created for the painting. So it was 3D models and 3D assets based on each of the paintings, which I then animated as sculptures and arranged into a scene, a looping video scene of all of these 3D elements animating the purely human-made ones alongside the AI-generated reinterpretation. So I took some of Dali's variations and then rebuilt them in Blender as their own 3D objects. So it's kind of going through this cycle of human and machine again. I was experimenting with some stable diffusion model training. So I'd trained a stable diffusion custom model on a set of images of my work. So yeah, I was experimenting with training my own model there, and then used this model that I had trained to reinterpret the video of these objects that I had rendered out. So it was kind of a frame by frame reinterpretation of this work. I'm really interested in not as much trying to create coherent and clear images as to experiment and play with the texture and the feeling of what it is that the AI tools can do and do output. So it was using this video of abstract images and then filtering it through an AI model trained on abstract images to create a different type of abstract imagery, and then layering these videos on top of each other. As a person walked around in the space, they would have the power to flip between this original 3D Blender render and the AI interpretation of the video. So you could move a sculpture in the space and it would trigger switching between it, or there was a camera overhead watching people move around in the space and it was creating a silhouette that was acting as a mask over the top of the image, so you could see yourself moving through the space, and by that movement creating a window through the video to see the AI interpretation of the video. All of this work was just experimenting with tools and creating a contrast and a balance and tension between the human-made and the physical and the digital, and kind of bouncing between all of these different areas. Someone that I like to think about in relation to my work is Marshall McLuhan. In his book of probes, one of the ones that I like to think about in relation to this stuff is that he says the most human thing about us is our technology, and thinking about AI as an extension of human toolmaking. It is not something that is separate from us, it's an extension of us, and it is just the latest development in a series of human tools, and what that means implementing these things in the way that you would implement other art making tools, and just using it as part of a collection of processes. There's a lot of interesting discussion around the potential and future potential for AI to develop true agency and creative capability, but I'm not sure about that. I think there's something about the inherent nature of AI models that means it is difficult for them to create something that is truly new. And I think definitely for now, they're still just tools to be used in certain ways. But I think the key is to understand how these tools work and what it is exactly that they're doing, and the ways that they create and the effects of that creation and the effects that you can see in the outcomes of the media that is generated. I think in relation to this and in relation to McLuhan's ideas about media in general, I think media literacy and a generalized understanding of AI generation in imagery and text and all these generative tools is going to be very important for everyone going forward. Another idea that I like to think about in relation to my work is Walter Benjamin and his idea of the aura of an art object, and the idea that an authentic art object carries with it certain signs of its creation and its life, and signifiers of a time and place and process that is specific to this object, and what it is that means for the object and what significance that gives to it. And this is something that can be lost in digital creation, and it behaves in a different way. I think there's something different about the aura of an object that is created by a machine learning model has a different set of time and process signifiers attached to it. I think, for example, you can look at a painting that shows brushstrokes and you can empathize with the artist and understand that each of these brushstrokes was created through a series of decisions by a person at a specific time and place, and then created through the movement of a body in this time and place, through this inherent understanding of the paintbrush as a tool and paint as a medium. You can understand how this thing was made and empathize with the artist in this way. And that's a simple example, but I think this kind of idea of empathy is key to effective art making and to my process and my practice, definitely. In contrast to thinking about this example of a painting, if we were to think about looking at a piece of AI machine learning generated imagery, it's more difficult to kind of see this process in the actual work and to comprehend how it has been made. Even if you have a basic understanding of like diffusion models and how these things work with the technical ways that machine learning and neural networks operate, which I have a very vague understanding after trying to get into this world. I think even having an understanding of the technicals of how it's built and how it works and how it's intended to work, there's a wall that you hit in this world of like neural networks and large machine learning models where it is kind of impossible to know what it is that the machine is doing, whether it breaks down to levels of complexity or it's just about the machine operating in machine language that it is impossible for a human to understand. I think this kind of boils down to the idea that yes, these machines are making things and making decisions, but they're making decisions in a way that is fundamentally different to how a human makes decisions. So it doesn't really serve either party well to try and mesh these things together or to judge these things on the same playing field. I think it comes down to this question of empathy, that it is impossible really for a human audience member and a viewer and an appreciator of this image to truly and fully engage and understand with the way that this piece of media was created. So there is inherently something opaque and inaccessible about this media because of the way that it is made. As an ideal form, art is kind of an empathy machine. It becomes possible to generate empathy between an audience and the artist, to create a connection through these objects that have something special about them, to create a connection between audience and artist, between audience and other audience members in the space, and then ongoing between these art objects and other art objects, thinking about these things kind of historically or museologically, the way that this conversation can continue, and the importance of understanding the context and process of things. For me in my practice, I explore these tools intuitively, feeling around the edges of what is possible and exploring new tools as they come available and like pushing things to the limit of what I have the capability to make them do, and using this to try and understand what it is that these things are capable of doing, whether it is comparing digital tools of making with physical tools of making, digital and physical media and processes, and bouncing back and forth between the two, and integrating AI into that making process has kind of supercharged the digital side of image creation. I enjoy this intuitive making process and exploration as a way of revealing the inherent properties of media. So it becomes about exploring what it is that a medium is capable of. This balance and tension in the work is something that I really find interesting, and I enjoy exploring and figuring out and feeling out as I go with making stuff. I think in using these tools, transparency is a really important thing as well. When we're talking about demonstrating new ways of making and new ways of creation, I think it's important to bring audiences along on the journey and also to be in conversation with other artists and creators that it is important to be transparent about what it is that you're using, and in very specific ways, I find. So like if you're using an image generator as a part of a process of making, it's important to attribute that. If it is as a collaborator, which on my Learning Machine exhibition, I listed DALL-E as a collaborator as kind of a joke, whether it is as a collaborative artist or as just in a medium list alongside the types of paints and material that are used in the work. I think it's important to attribute that specifically. One, so that audiences who might not be familiar know that machine learning is a part of this process, and that might be an invitation to explore further, a starting point to explore and understand, and then for two, as a conversation with people who are familiar with machine learning tools as a way of understanding specifically what you used in the work and how it was used, and being able to see that because of the nature of the opacity of how machine learning models and tools work. I think it's important to attribute whether it is I'm using DALL-E 2 in this work, or I'm using Stable Diffusion, or being specific about what it is that is used and the way that it is used, I think is useful. Communicating to people something about the work that it would be impossible to glean just from looking at the actual object itself. I think art making, and especially public art and kind of open and accessible art spaces, are an important arena for the development of this technology as a way and a place for people to openly and transparently engage with these tools and processes, and to learn about them in a way that doesn't really have another agenda. AI tools are already being implemented in all sorts of places, whether it is on social media, delivering you content, or advertising, or marketing materials, or all of these kind of things that are only going to come more and more saturated with AI interventions. I think it's important to have a space where a person can openly engage and have some level of understanding and communication with these tools without another intervening party or agenda there, mainly to sell things. As these tools develop more and more, it is going to be a key thing to develop understanding and literacy alongside the rapid development of what they're capable of. And I think art can be a powerful exploratory space and teaching and understanding instrument for these things outside of advertising and content and marketing. As artists and creators, I think it is extremely exciting to have access to these kind of tools that allow us to do new and different things, and to do things faster and better and different all the time. But I think it's important to balance this enthusiasm and eagerness with an understanding of a need for context and communication, and keeping an audience with us. There needs to be a common ground of communication between audiences and artists, between the machine and the artists, and between machines and the consumers of what it is that these machines are making. As an audience, I feel like it's important to understand the context of what it is that I am seeing, and it's going to be a big thing to be developing the understanding of general public and have a generalized education around machine learning and AI generated imagery and materials, and what it is and what it means, for people to keep up to pace with this stuff. I think art provides a good space for experimentation and exploration, and provide an avenue to familiarize yourself with these tools outside of the worlds of advertising and content, and the nudging and pushing that can happen when other agendas are in the conversation. I think as artists and audiences alike, there's a lot of exciting potential in these new tools, but also on the other side of that, a lot of things to be aware of and to continue to be educated about in a world that is more and more algorithmically driven. Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening. I'm excited to chat more about all of this kind of stuff, and hopefully we'll have time to answer some questions. Thanks.